So let's get started, and welcome again to the Citizen Science Data and Information Quality session. And this session is a collaboration effort between the ECIP Information Quality Cluster. As you can see, the list of chair and co-chairs of the ECIP Information Quality Cluster, or IQC here, and also with representatives from the Citizen Science Association. Greg Newman, M. Bowser, and Chamo Manzo, and also Clay from Wilson Center. So to move forward, first I want to give a brief introduction to ECIP IQC. And the vision of the ECIP Information Quality Cluster is to become internationally recognized as an authoritative and responsive information resource for guiding the implementation of data quality standards and the best practices of the science data systems, data sets, and the data and the metadata dissemination services. The four aspects of information quality outlined by ECIP IQC are the science quality, product quality, stewardship quality, and service quality. And the recent efforts of the ECIP IQC have been focusing on expanding the scope from we traditionally looked at the data quality information associated with satellite-based remote sensing. And now we are trying to expand the scope of the IQC to include other types of data, like airborne observations, in-situ observations, modeling, and the simulation outputs, as well as citizen science data product. And here on the screen, you see the URL to the ECIP IQC wiki page. And feel free to check our wiki page to find additional information like the recent activities, and sometimes we post links to useful resources regarding information quality for science. So it's a nice place to check. And also I encourage you to subscribe to the ECIP IQC mailing list if you have not done that. So I hope everyone can hear me okay and also see my screen okay. But if you have any issue hearing me or seeing my presentation, just let me know. So we organized the Citizen Science Data and Information Quality session earlier this year at the ECIP 2020 winter meeting. That session served as a kickoff discussion to broaden the scope of IQC efforts into the area of citizen science data and information quality. And we invited the speakers from multiple agencies, including NOAA, NASA, to share their firsthand experience and thoughts on capturing and improving quality of citizen science data. There were a number of takeaways from the winter meeting session, and including those quality assurance aspects performed in the GLOBE Citizen Science Program, which includes standardized protocols, participant training, range and logic checks, and photo approval. There are some additional takeaways, but the ones that I want to highlight here is, as the last bullet on this slide, is the potential topics that we identified at the winter meeting that was for future IQC discussion. And those two topics were first, assigning DOIs for citizen science data, and the second, assess the maturity of citizen science data. So we have been moving forward from there. We had some great discussion with Citizen Science Association representatives. So here we are at this second Citizen Science Data and Information Qualities at the summer meeting. And today's agenda contains mainly two components. First, we have two invited presentations, and each presentation will be 10 minutes. And then after we finish both presentations, we will have another 10 minutes to address questions for both speakers. And I encourage you to type your question into the Zoom meeting chat window or directly into the presentation question section in our Google Doc, which I will show you briefly a little bit later. And then after the presentations, we will have a discussion surrounding the topic of a roadmap toward a rubric for the evaluation of quality levels associated with citizen science data. And during that discussion, we'll first start with a review of a draft survey that we have been working on for the purpose to collect additional data quality requirements from a number of citizen science data users. And then we will follow up with a discussion, a general discussion toward the evaluation of quality levels for citizen science data. Now, eventually we will summarize 3 takeaways. So a brief summary on the session goals. We want to share experience, of course, practices, and the state of the art of research on citizen science data quality, and also identify opportunities to improve the capture, documentation, and use of quality information for citizen science data. And more specifically, we hope to develop an approach to determine the quality requirements for policymakers, community leaders, and other non-academic scientists to use data products in decision making. And this is related to that draft survey I just mentioned. And then lastly, we want to develop a roadmap toward a rubric for the evaluation of quality levels attained by citizen science data products and services. So now, before we start the presentation, let me briefly show you the structure of the Google Doc that we use for today's session. So if you can see my screen, I just switched to Kiko Chat, and on the right side of the Kiko Chat window is the Google Doc. And in the Google Doc, you see the agenda and also the timeline, as well as links to the presentations. And also link to the draft survey if you want to take a look at it. And then the attendance list, please add your name and affiliation to the attendance list if you have not done so. And below that is the goals, a list of goals for this session. And then under that, I want to point out a few sections for you. So we have the presentation questions section. So after we finish the 2 presentations, we will have dedicated 10 minutes for addressing the questions for both presenters. So while you are listening the presentations, feel free to type your questions for our presenters directly into this section, or you can choose to type your questions into the Zoom chat window, and our session chairs will be monitoring both places, and we'll come back to address the questions. And then we have some other sections in the Google Doc. We have a dedicated section to capture your comments and questions for the draft survey. After I run a brief introduction to the survey. And also I put some seeding questions for you to consider and hopefully to inspire some of the questions from the audience. But if you have any comments or concerns or questions, feel free to put either into the Google Doc directly or into the Zoom chat window. And then another section I want to point you to is the discussion and the open question section, which will be addressing your comments and questions for the remainder of this session. And again, there are some seeding questions here. Hope they will be useful. And eventually we're going to summarize and capture 3 takeaways. So that's the introduction. At this point, do you have any questions or comments or concerns? Feel free to bring them up. If not, I think we can go ahead to move on to our presentations. Our first presentation is from Greg Newman from Colorado State University. So Greg, let me stop sharing and you can share your screen from your computer.
Wonderful. Thank you, Yaxine. And yeah, thank you everyone for this opportunity. Let me share my screen and we'll get going. As Yaxine mentioned, I'm happy to field any questions as we go through this, but we'll do that in that question and answer session in the agenda. So yeah, I guess I just want to say with a huge amount of gratitude and thanks to Yaxine and the ESIP IQC team for extending the invitation to myself and Anne via Clay and to the Citizen Science Association Data and Metadata Quality Working Group. We are grateful to be connecting these two sectors and working groups, so to speak. And we're just grateful to be able to have this opportunity to talk about data quality and citizen science. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the role of platforms in improving citizen science data quality and reuse, a little with an eye towards challenges and opportunities. And I have a lot of information to share in 10 minutes, so hang on to your hats, and hopefully this will be an engaging session. So I want to start with 3 main points, and these points are just, I come at this from about 15 years now, with a focus of my work in developing and assessing citizen science platforms and developing platforms to help scaffold citizen science workflows, support quality assurance, quality control in citizen science, and with the ultimate aim of delivering confidence, trust, and value for improving the quality of life and through high quality science and evidence-based decision-making so that we can improve the world in which we live. So with those 3 points in mind, I just want to kind of get your brains thinking as we go through this, thinking about who uses citizen science data. Are they using it in science context, decision-making context? Who are these decision makers? For those using it, are they looking at raw data observations or summary statistics? Are we documenting data quality for scientific reuse or policy reuse or both? Are we really thinking about access, awareness, trust, quality, and norms? And finally, how can we ensure citizen science data quality, product quality, stewardship quality, and service quality? I really like what ESIP has come up with these facets of quality, and I'll touch on them briefly as we go out. So keep these in mind as we go through this, and maybe they'll make good staging questions for discussion later. But first, an example of how platforms can scaffold citizen science workflows. And I come at this being the director of citsci.org, one of many now citizen science support platforms. And I come at this from basically my background is in ecology. I'm a plant ecologist, and about 20 years ago, we were developing systems for invasive species mapping and modeling, and our models are, think of it as a weather forecast, they were bad. And so they were predicting the weeds wrong. And they were doing that wrong because we were only sampling on public land, not private land. And so we needed the crowdsourced help of the public to help us better understand where noxious weeds were. And so that hence was born my foray into citizen science in developing citsci.org, where as an organization, CITSI is really driven by our mission to provide comprehensive support for citizen science programs globally, with the 3 goals of supporting the full spectrum of citizen science support needs, elevating the rigor and quality of citizen science data, and improving data standardization, interoperability, integration, access, and sharing or dissemination. So basically our goal is to provide a comprehensive support platform where anyone, anywhere can co-create and enact citizen science projects themselves and have the confidence that these projects will generate rigorous data, advancing scientific understanding and yielding positive impacts for society. So when people go about creating a citizen science project prior to platforms, they were in a nature center, they were saying, hey, let's go engage the public in mapping butterflies or assessing butterfly abundance. And so they'd kind of create a project on a whiteboard. And they thought, well, this should be pretty straightforward. We'll create a project, we'll recruit some volunteers, we'll build a data sheet for them to take a clipboard out. This is, of course, remember 20 years ago before smartphones. And they'd say, okay, take that clipboard out and fill out some information about butterflies, collect that data, then we'll put it into a spreadsheet, analyze it, do some interpretation, share the results, and voila, we've got ourselves a citizen science project. But what really needs to be done is far much more superior in thinking and resource intensive, from creating logic models to asking research questions in effective scientific ways, managing member roles, identifying scientific protocols, vetting those protocols, identifying methods, identifying partner scientists to partner with, statisticians, developing trainings. I saw in Yaxine's slide, the GLOBE program, participant training. That's certainly one means through which we can gain better quality data from citizen science projects. Don't forget to buy burritos, right? You know, we gotta buy burritos and feed our volunteers and keep them happy, meeting Maslow's needs, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and train those volunteers, order supplies, perform quality assurance, quality control, run statistics. You get the idea, write reports, do data visualizations. There's a lot that needs to be done in citizen science. So what we need to do is think about the design models, the governance models, the data models, and the protocols. And so what we've been really interested in doing is developing through our platform, one of many platforms now that support citizen science, to really think about how we can templatize rigorous scientific protocols from sampling designs, experimental designs, analytical methods, and then support the data models needed from text, categorical, numeric, multimedia, et cetera. And then think about the design and governance. And so colleagues of mine and I put a paper out in Citizen Science Theory and Practice recently about data governance in citizen science, and Ian Bowser and the Wilson Center has also done a lot of work in this space, but thinking about data ownership, data access, you know, open science versus maybe more private data sets for protection of, say, threatened and endangered species locations. And anyway, just a nod to thinking about data governance. So what we've done is we've built one of many now platforms that kind of scaffold the workflows of citizen science, from finding projects to participate. If that's your workflow, you're coming at it from a volunteer's perspective, to creating projects as a project manager with these project management tools that we offer, to setting up and managing governance of members. If this is a member-based project, you might approve a member because they've gone through your training. Or if it's an open project, you might just forego that and not have the gatekeeper role. So managing all the governance associated with these endeavors, and then creating the scientific protocols using our datasheet creator to really drag and drop certain, drop down, integer, text, image, audio, video, and say, okay, what do we want the volunteers to measure? This is just a kind of hypothetical example of favorite ice cream, but obviously we'd be measuring bats, birds, fish, frogs, and pH, et cetera. So, and then of course, uploading predefined monitoring locations, setting up opportunistic locations, whether you're just looking for where you found a coyote, for example. And then uploading bulk data to these data sets, and then looking at finally, ultimately, volunteers submitting observations and looking at the metadata associated with those observations, tweeting them out, and then visualizing a series of repeated observations over time at a single location, as is this example where we're looking at air temperature and water temperature submitted by volunteers at a particular creek since 2014, and this has continued all the way to today. And then looking at, of course, visualizations in geospatial context of where these projects are. So if you're seeking to join one of these projects on these portals or platforms, you can click on one and quickly join and request to join membership and get started. So, and then of course, in traditional GIS ways, query for the observations of a particular project and visualize these queries spatially as well. We've also built in this particular platform, the ability to make comparisons across sites to do some analysis, complete with, automated generated standard errors and whatnot, to compare, say, air temperature at 4 of 245 monitoring locations as submitted by volunteers through citizen science means. And then stay in touch with automated communications and reports in your inbox of, hey, new observations were made, or please notify me through push notifications and that kind of thing. So all this to say, of course, and make these on on your mobile phone, make these observations and submit them to these various platforms. So platforms.
1 minute.
Yeah. So platforms have a role in scaffolding the citizen science workflow process, from governance of members to quality assurance of observations, and there's peer review potentially baked into this. And anyway, that's point one. And hopefully with that scaffolding of the workflows of citizen science, we can increase and improve scientific impacts, participant impacts, conservation impacts, and ultimately this piece about decision and policy impacts. So next, I want to talk about point 2. And that is kind of an example of how platforms can support quality assurance, quality control. And this is just to highlight that there's a variety of mechanisms in place in active citizen science projects, both being hosted on platforms and having built their own platforms or what have you, through different mechanisms. And these include expert review, photo submissions, paper data sheets, along with online submission to look at data entry errors, replication or rating by multiple people, quality assurance, quality control, participant training programs, automated filtering for outliers or unusual reports with range outliers, as mentioned in the GLOBE program and Yaxine slide, uniform standardized equipment, replication rating by data contributors themselves, rating of established control items, and validation or control samples. So you can actually have experts go out and take out control samples at particular places where volunteers have sampled and get comparisons in that way. And Andrea Wiggins and colleagues of mine put together a paper way back in the day in 2011 of assessing what of these different approaches are most popular and most likely to be used in citizen science. This may change now if we were to redo this research. But in general, we're seeing a lot of expert review, of course, lots of photo submissions and photo validation. So back in the day, paper data sheets were in fact used on replication and QA/QC training. And then it kind of waned from there. So in general, platforms are using a variety of these approaches, from our own platform with expert review, photos, and repeat observations. And
Greg, I'm sorry, the 10 minutes are up. You could
thank you. I'm so sorry. I will finish there. I thought I had my timer on, and I apologize. So we'll keep it there. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Greg, for the very thoughtful thoughts and the materials you shared. So Greg's slides can be accessed from the link provided in the Google Doc. So feel free to download Greg's slides to take a further look. Thanks, Greg, again. Now let's move on to our second presentation. Our second presentation is from Ann Bowser from Wilson, but unfortunately Ann cannot join us today. And we are very glad to have Clay Herbaugh from Wilson Center as well, helping with the presentation and our session. Great, I can see your screen, Clay. And Clay Harbaugh is the technical lead for the Earth Challenge 2020. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity to present, and hopefully I'll do it justice. Sorry that Ann couldn't be here today. Ann has much more the science side. I'm a tech lead, so you'll get a little bit of the more of the tech geeky side from me than you might have got from Ann, but hopefully it'll be enjoyable, and I'll just walk you through. The Earth Challenge, we used to call it the Earth Challenge 2020, was an app that was envisioned for Earth Day 2020. It is an effort that was co-signed on between the Wilson Center, the Earth Day Network, and the Department of State. And that's why you see I'm from the Department of State and Ann's from the Wilson Center. So we've worked as a collaborative group to build this neat tool out. And so when we were building the Earth Challenge, we really had two goals that we were looking at, and I'll be focusing on goal one today, but it was to increase the amount of open interoperable citizen science data, and then also make sure that it was publicly available and that we could drive policy action based off of people interacting with citizen science data in a way that spurred them to do more. So we really focus in terms of research areas. That's how we look at all the tools that we build, and this is where we really see an opportunity. As we determine new research areas, we expand out our app and we expand the data that we pull out. So we started first with plastics and air quality, and that's what we used in the Earth Day app. And then we've started to explore other areas. So now we're focused on insects and pollinators, and in food supply, being able to identify crops. So we've really expanded what we're doing in terms of the research questions. So for air quality, we're looking at PM 2.5, but we understand that for each of these research questions, there's a lot of things that we can do to kind of expand our area of purview, but we're starting at just one simple thing that we can accomplish for each. So for plastic solutions, we're looking at plastics debris along the coastline. So each one we've focused on one area, noting that there's so many areas that we can expand to later. So we've developed an app that's available in the Google Store as well as the Apple Store, I guess the Google Play Store. And this is a screenshot, and you can see each of those research questions become a widget. And somebody can come in and they can select air quality, open up the app, and they can take a picture of the horizon where they are. And they can say, I believe my air quality is at a certain level. I think it's from a 1 to 6 grading. And then we show them, based on the closest reference grade monitor, what their actual air quality is. So it allows them to interact and understand. But when they're loading the image in, we run that through our API. And so we're training in the background an API that allows us to understand if we can derive what their air quality is based on the image. So the citizen scientist is learning, but they're also contributing back to the community as they use the app. Currently, we have over 25,000 downloads. We're processing over 126 million rows in our data platform, which is Kinetica, which is a GPU-based data analytics platform. It really can process data extremely quickly. So things that were taking us months to do are now taking hours to do. So it's a really powerful platform that we've implemented. And then we push all our data into ArcGIS Online, and we're able to visualize our data. And I'll show you an example of that. So we get data not only from our app, but we also go out and we find different data sources that are relevant, and we pull that data into our environment as well. So we have what we call our raw area within Amazon Web Services, where we pull in all this disparate data. We process that data based on standards and get it into an interoperable data set. We then do analysis on the data, which then is processed out to what we call our derived data sets, which are made available. What's really nice about this is that it gives many opportunities to interact with our data, whether it's simply looking at a map or pulling down our data from the data catalog in an API form, or if you're a data scientist, actually being able to work in the Kinetica platform and coming up with analytics that will be processed within Kinetica. So there are many different entry points to working with the data. Here's an example of visualization within the ArcGIS Online. We're looking at Australia now, and we're looking at coastal plastic debris. And we learned a lot of really interesting things, like the culture can change the sort of debris that we see along the coastline. In Australia, you see cigarette butts are really high. In some areas where there's not a lot of smoking, as you can expect, the cigarette butts are a much lower percentage. So it's very interesting that we can see the sort of plastics that are being collected in an aggregate form, and we can start to look and slice that data in different ways. So how do we get to a point where we have interoperable data that we can then share through our data catalog and through our mapping? So the first thing we do is we identify partner data sets. So as you saw, we were mapping plastics. So we had 3 different data sets as well as our application that we're pulling in the data. So we're using NOAA's MDM map. We're using tides data. And then we're also using the Marine Litter Watch data. All that data is pulled in, and then we set it up so that it's in a standard format. So then we take that data, we ingest it in, and we start to crosswalk it so that we make sure that all that data looks the same in terms of being able to visualize it. So this is kind of looking behind the sheets to see the sort of exercises that we have. So in this case, we were looking at Sensor Things API. And so that is a data standard that aligns to the Open Geospatial Consortium, the OGC standard. And then we looked at our data sets and we crosswalked them to the Sensor Things data. So we did this for air quality. And so it was very interesting because we were looking at, for air quality, we were looking at static sensors at the consumer level. But we were also looking at, we had a couple like AQ Tracks and Sensor Community, which were roaming sensors. And so taking all those disparate types of data sources, pulling them in, mapping them to the standard, and making sure that they make sense in an interoperable way that we can visualize. At all levels, we have to think in terms of data quality. We want people to understand how we collected the data, but also make sure that they understand that the level of trust that they should have in the data. So we have URIs that allow you to look and see just the process and protocols that we use to collect the data, or how the data was collected from the data sources that we provide.
1 minute left.
I'm sorry?
1 minute warning.
Oh, thank you. And so we also look at quality grades like consumer, business, reference, and we track that and make sure that's available to people that use the data. The backside of that is that we, and I'll do this as quickly as I possibly can, we push our data into derived buckets with metadata, such as if we're pulling in hourly data and we want to do some minimum and maximum and averages, we pull that into the derived and make that available via our APIs. And we have data catalogs where we collect all the documentation on it. 3 key areas of lessons learned that we had. One is that, data quality starts at the very beginning. And I think Greg made that point as well, is that it really starts at the volunteer training. You really have to think about data quality from the beginning all the way through, document well, and documentation starts at the beginning of the process as well. And then the control vocabularies. iNaturalist uses a slightly different term for things that we use. So trying to make sure that we can get norms around the vocabulary across everybody who's involved with citizen science data projects is really critical to help moving forward. So with that, I'll end. Absolutely reach out to Anne if you have further questions beyond what I can answer today. She has a much more scientific approach, and as Greg said, she really has her thumb on the governance and a lot more. If you need techie questions, I'm the guy, and I'd be happy to answer them. Thank you for letting me present, and I really appreciate your time.
Thank you very much, Clay. It's a great presentation. Now let's move on to the QA part. I think we have already received a number of questions. Peng, could you please go through the questions?
Yeah, we have some questions. Let me see, can I share my screen? Okay, great presentations, and thanks everybody who have been communicating on the chat as well as in the Google Doc. And I will start with the ones that has asked Craig. Does the Citizen Science Association anticipate sharing the platforms with other citizen science research efforts?
Yeah, great question. And a point of clarification, the platform I shared was a platform that our team has been developing and has been out for use for maybe 12, 13 years now. It is not a Citizen Science Association platform. It's a platform developed at Colorado State University called citsci.org. But yes, there is intent to share that platform with other citizen science research efforts. We are really interested in systems interoperability and are currently integrating the citsci.org platform with the Zooniverse, with iNaturalist we have hopes for, and already with scistarter.org. And so we're very interested in data interoperability and system interoperability through sharing, and citsci.org is entirely API based. In its latest release, hopefully this fall. It's an API-based platform. So great question.
Thank you. For those cannot see the Google Doc, and I'm going to read the question from David Jones. That's already been answered by Craig. I'm just going to read them out and ask if there's any additional feedback. So the question was, how do you provide access to the observations and the data for other GIS platforms such as web services, feature services? Do you have a way to test data access and sharing? Thanks. And Craig has replied, where web services usually, although we are exploring more ways to do this effectively. Dave and Craig, do you have any additional comments? Oh, that's pretty good, being addressed to yourself.
I would say one of the interesting things that we're exploring is tiered levels. So in terms of, we not only share our APIs, and we share some APIs publicly and then some on the back end to other systems, but also the AGOL we provide it out where people can see it from a data catalog perspective, and then they can also just see the visualizations and use that. The third tier is the dedicated to the more hardcore citizen scientists, is providing them access to Kinetica where they can use the platform. So there's the opportunity to pull into your own tools if you have tools that you want to use, but then there's also opportunity to use our platform as well.
Great, thanks.
That sounds good. This is Dave. I was just looking to see if there were citizen science reports that are coming in to any particular site that might be beneficial to combine with other official observations, whether there were satellite-based observations or things like that, that might enhance some of the situational awareness of of decision makers.
Great. So there's a exchange between Craig and Karen, and I'll again read it out later if I have a chance, if I have time. For now, there's a question for both Craig and Clay. How do you ensure the privacy of volunteers while facilitating transparency?
For us, we do not collect information on volunteers. So you download the app and you put your information in terms of the picture, but there's no association in terms of the person's name or information as what we consider PII. So that's how we ensure privacy in terms of volunteers, but you're also downloading the app and you're accepting the Apple Store general guidelines that are part of downloading an app.
Yeah, and it's a great question to follow on to Clay. We find our platform used in more hyper-local situations and contexts, and therefore we do collect information through registrations, standard registration information, first, last, email, username, that kind of thing. And we offer a variety of governance structures around that PII, from allowing the registrant to either go anonymous or have it be first dot last initial or have it be username. It's entirely up to the volunteer to dictate and specify in the my preferences section how they'd like to be listed. And we did that to support a more broad range of governance needs for a variety of citizen science projects and contexts. Great question.
Great. The next question is from Chen Ling to our presenters about DOI. Do you think or feel comfortable or confident and ready to issue DOIs to your citizen science datasets, assuming it's not yet done?
Could you repeat that question, Peng, just one more time?
Okay, so it's about whether you feel comfortable or confident or ready to issue DOIs to datasets.
Yeah, that's a really great question. We've been working with what's called the Mountain Scholar Data Repository at Colorado State University's library from a library science angle and from a curation standpoint and a DOI standpoint. And our goal is to, and we've not yet reached this goal, to allow project managers to bundle up citizen science derived data sets once cleaned and assured with respect to documentation and quality, and be able to automate the export of that through APIs, web services, et cetera, to deposit that data set into a Mountain Scholar-like archive. And that's, I think, geez, I'm gonna forget the software that they're using, but in any event, in which case we would get a DOI for that bundled data set. That's to be an immutable reference to that immutable data set. As you know, in citizen science, the data sets are evolving and changing in real time very often through these platforms, and we offer some QA/QC so the volunteer themselves can say, I made a mistake, I made a typo, and so they can edit their attribute that they made that's for that observation. And so things are changing in real time, and so it becomes important that we take a snapshot in time and represent that in a DOI'd data set for long-term use, reuse, and publication. So great question.
So we are at the 1 minute warning for this portion of the session, just so everybody's aware.
Okay, thank you, David. I think we will have a time for next question. And this is too quick from Yashin. Can the platform be generalized to address the needs from different citizen science projects?
So the answer is yes, but it's a little bit controlled for us because we are still in the neophyte age of really just getting everything in that platform and making that available. So we're still learning. So something that we expect to do down the road, but we're not there yet. So as Greg talked about, building out a platform, it really takes learning and really driving it before you make it available to start growing it outside of your kind of harmonized environment. So we definitely think that that's down the road, and we see that as an opportunity, but we're not there yet.
Thank you very much, Clay.
Thank you. There are other questions captured in the Google Doc, and the people who can't access to it, please take a look. And Craig and Clay, if you get a chance to answer some of the questions, that would be appreciated. I think my time is up for now.
Thank you very much, Peng. I really appreciate our two presenters and also appreciate the questions from the audience. I think we had a really great discussion, and discussion will continue, I believe. And Greg and Clay both will be staying with us throughout the session. So if you have any questions, please continue putting them into the Zoom chat or into our Google Doc. Thanks again.
Thank you, everyone.
Now let's move on to our next item on the agenda. Let me first share my screen. So let me move to our agenda in the Google Doc. So the next topic is to discuss a topic that is a roadmap toward a rubric of the evaluation of quality levels associated with citizen science data and also products, including services. But before we get started, let me provide you with some background context behind this topic. As I mentioned earlier, one of the future discussion topics identified at the winter ISIN meeting was assessing the maturity of citizen science data. And the other one was, of course, assigning DOIs to citizen science data, which Chun-Lin raised his question. Again, I think that's another important topic that we can have some further discussion down the road. And then after the ECIP winter meeting, during the conversation that IQC had with Citizen Science Association, and one idea came up. We thought it would be nice to have a number of quality levels that can be tagged or associated with citizen science data products, and also a rubric or a matrix that can be used to evaluate such quality levels. And then through some discussion, we realized that building some quality levels and also such an evaluation rubric have to take users and broad users, including decision makers' requirements on data quality into consideration. And then we came up with an idea of doing a survey to collect such user requirements. So that comes to the first topic in this discussion is I'm going to show you a draft survey to capture such data quality requirements from broad audience. And I really want to hear your thoughts. If you have any questions, suggestions, or concerns, whatever you have, feel free to bring them up. So in the Google Doc, you see the review of a draft survey to collect the data quality requirements is hyperlinked. You can click on that and you will open a new Google Doc, which is this one. I hope you all can see this draft survey Google Doc displayed on my screen. So first I want to start with the research questions. Why we want to develop this survey and what's the purpose. And the direct research question that we want to address in this survey is to find out what are the data quality requirements for different stakeholders to use data products in decision making. And we expect outcomes and findings from this survey study will provide insights and also guidance to a number of stakeholders like funding agencies, state producers, distributors to better capture, describe, present, and enable use of data quality information, especially those for citizen science data, by addressing a number of additional research questions, which are listed here. And I'm not going to go through each one of them, but hope you have an idea of the force that have been driving us to come up with this survey. And then the target audience that we identified through our previous discussion currently include a number of ESIP communities and also environmental data governance initiative, and also the Citizen Science Association mailing list. There can be additional communities that we can target. And I'm looking forward to see your thoughts and comments on that. And then here comes the draft survey we established. So this was work that was done maybe 2 months ago through a number of telecoms and conversations. And we came up right now 11 questions. We are targeting at about 15 minutes time range for the survey. And the first question in the survey is, which group are you affiliated with? And then next one is, what's your role? Are you doing this policy or decision making? Are you a data analyst, a researcher? And we want opinion from different types of users on their opinion of using citizen science data in decision-making purpose. And then a question about how long have you been in this role? And also what types of data have you used to support policy and decision-making? I want to mention that a number of questions in this survey, especially those few questions at the beginning, do not limit to citizen science data. We want to get their thoughts and ideas on different types of data. So we first check what types of data they have used to support policy and decision making. And this type is a list of, let's say, scientific themes like atmospheric, ecological, weather, climate, and so on. And this is definitely not a comprehensive list, and this is just a draft pick list that we have identified through the discussion. And again, we are looking for suggestions on refining this list or add any item that's currently missing. And the next question we want to ask is, what are the sources? And this is the part that touches the citizen science data part. We want to know if they have used observations from remote sensing, airborne in situ, model, or citizen science data. So this is where we start to touch the citizen science data. And then the next question is, what's the minimum quality information required for using data in policy and decision making? One option provided here is no minimum. And then the next is, what properties determine whether a data set is fit for use in policy and decision making? And then some other questions include, what additional properties do you consider when evaluating a dataset's fitness for policy and decision making in case our predefined list does not capture every single property. And then,
actually, a quick reminder that we're at 1 minute before the start of the Q&A, approximately.
okay, great, thanks, David. And then the last 3 questions are all about citizen science data products. We want to find out if the users have used any citizen science data products in decision-making for decision-making purpose. And if yes, what citizen science data products they have used. And there may be users who have been considering using citizen science data products for decision making, but may not have started doing so for many reasons. And we want to learn the concerns or the issues that they identified for this particular purpose. So that's a very brief review of the research question and also the draft survey and the target audience for this survey. I think now it's time for discussion. Peng, do we currently have any comments or?
Yes, we do. Thanks, Yaxin. I'm thinking since Bob is really working very closely and behind scene with you on the survey form, whether he will be a better person to facilitate the questions.
Bob, if you don't mind. Bob is taking notes.
Yes, sure.
I will oversee the note taking.
I'll be glad to
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. So we have a bunch of questions here, and let me start at the top. So from Steve Young, he's saying, we agree that striving to make citizen science data useful for decision making is important, but we also should think about how to make citizen science data more useful for doing science upstream from supporting decision making. We need a logic model, better citizen science data, new and better science support for better decisions. Any questions or any comments on that?
I think that's a great point, Steve. Thanks for
I do. Yeah, go ahead, Yaxin.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think Steve's point is a really great point, and there's definitely been incidences of citizen science allowing for new, novel, otherwise unattainable science and actually making that scientific discovery possible on the upstream science side and generating peer-reviewed publications. I think one motivation for this survey is to think from kind of begin with the end in mind and think about, okay, that logic model you presented is awesome. And let's find some evidence to figure out what the lived experiences of decision makers are. And I prior to this session, I put 2 different things down on my own little notes here. And it's very different if you're talking about somebody at the EU or something looking at a sustainable development goal and trying to make maybe a very broad sweeping global policy versus like a local land management organization such as a natural areas program who's trying to decide whether to allow mountain bikers on trails or not, which might be impacted by erosion, which might affect a native plant, for example. So I think we have to think about the lived experiences of these decision makers and ask them in reality, very candidly, what are you looking at? Are you going to that peer-reviewed upstream science and saying science says, or are you grasping at straws to find any available information you can find out of a Google search? And so I just want to make the point that this survey gives us an opportunity into the day in the life of a decision maker that we might otherwise not know about.
Oh, great. Thank you very much, Greg. There's also a comment here from Eileen Shea, and she said she just wants to echo Steve Young's point. Engaging teachers and their students in citizen science programs can be exciting and lead some to science as a field. Worked in the Pacific region for SPARSE, S-P-A-R-S-E, a rainfall measurements program with teachers, with the students, work captured in professional journal articles and conference presentations. It really excited them to be part of science. So did someone want to comment on that?
This is Ashton. I just want to appreciate Eileen's comment. I think that's another important aspect that we want to engage really a broad range of users in this conversation, and also hopefully in this survey, that we can not only enable more science, but also being able to encourage and help some potential students and future researchers to conduct science by taking the citizen science approach.
Oh, great. Thank you very much, Yaksheng. So we also have a bunch of questions from Jessica Burnett, who had to leave before the end of the session. So she provided those in writing. And so I'll ask them one at a time because there are a few here. Have or do you plan to consult an online survey expert to design and administer? And then she's saying, if not, I have at least one colleague who I suspect might be interested in helping, although I see Dr. Straub is here, so.
Great, great suggestion. Bob, can I consider you as the survey expert?
I would hope to be a little more modest in that, but I have conducted surveys in the past and study survey design and development, and I'm glad to contribute in any ways I can. But I think that having additional experts is a great idea too, because having multiple perspectives on the design of a survey, and especially on the revision of questions can certainly help. There's nothing worse than a survey that has poorly written questions, and often those who are writing surveys are making assumptions that are fine from their own experience, but those assumptions don't necessarily hold for the survey respondent. So it's great to have additional expertise looking at these things.
Great, I totally agree.
The next question from Jessica Burnett is, are the currently listed targeted audiences, e.g. ESA cluster members, going to be representative of policy or decision makers? And will responses from this audience help the RQs?
That's a very good question. I don't think many of the users from the currently listed audience are decision makers, but I assume some of them have conducted data analysis or science discovery for the purpose of decision making downstream. And I want to mention two things. First, we really want to hear from you what other communities and target audience we should include in our list. And second, just a comment going back to Steve Young's comment on that workflow, citizen science data, and then doing science, and then in fact, policy making downstream. I think one reason that we include other types of users, even though they have not directly done decision making, such as the data analysis storage. I hope that makes sense.
Yes, yes. And an additional question from Jessica Burnett is, careful with the term decision or decision makers. Some have very different views. And I think that's a really great point that she's raising. Did anyone want to comment on that?
This is Rama. I just want to comment a little bit on the previous question, which is about cluster members. The information quality cluster members are probably not going to be representative of any of the policymakers, but some of the applications-oriented clusters like envirosensing and the disaster response clusters are good proxies for them because they've been digging into these kinds of issues.
Oh, great. And did anyone want to comment on the use of the term decision makers?
Yeah, this is Greg Newman. I think that that's a fantastic point to be careful about. And I'd like to bring in the thinking of Steve Blank and Eric Rice, who Eric wrote a book called The Lean Startup. And Steve Blank is known in the business sector for his quote, get out of the building and do what's called customer discovery. And I think what defines a customer and what defines a decision and what defines a decision maker are related, as well as who is the stakeholders and audiences that this survey is hoping to reach. And it sort of gets to Rama's point about IQC cluster members and thinking about how to share this survey and to whom it goes to and the purpose of the survey. And I think that your point about being careful there is important. I'm a big fan of getting out of the building and meaning getting out of our own circles and thinking a little bit broader and saying, let's talk to those folks that are trying to use science to derive data sets in their daily decision-making context. Now, what you mean by decision-making is very, very, very well taken. So I think we should unpack that more.
Yes, I completely agree with you, Greg. We have another couple of questions from very specific questions or comments on specific questions from Jessica Burnett. And she's saying, question 4 is a very vague question. In question 10, some folks may not be aware that the data they use are citizen science. And I think that goes to the early point that was made about assumptions that might be in the questions that might not seem such assumptions until somebody goes to answer the question.
So just a really quick time reminder, we're about 1 minute away from our scheduled next discussion on the quality levels for citizen science data. So Yakshin, you can decide where you want to go from here.
So I think we can address one more question or comment, Bob.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
I think we have time to address one more comment or question on this topic.
Okay, well, let's skip down here. There's a question, well, there's a question about IRB needs. Do you plan to obtain institutional review board approval prior to conducting the survey in accordance with ethical norms of science? And yeah, I guess that will have to be the question.
Bob, I believe you have enough knowledge to address this question. And
sure, I'm glad to do that. So yes, I completely agree that we need to be in league with ethical norms of science, and we should work with an institutional review board to receive approval on the design and survey questions, as well as our procedures and protocols for the survey prior to asking anybody to participate as a research survey respondent.
Thank you very much, Bob.
Hey, if we could ask others to either add additional questions or to provide responses to some of these questions in here, or even suggested responses, that would be really helpful.
Yes, definitely. I'm so glad that we received so many suggestions and comments. Please continue. We're going to move on to the next discussion, but if you have any additional comments or thoughts, suggestions in your mind, please put them into the Google Doc, and we will continue have the discussion even after the session finishes, because this is an effort that I'm really excited about, and even more excited to see so many great suggestions from you. Thanks. Now I think we can move on to the next discussion topic. Let me move back to my, actually showing this presentation will be better. Is the discussion surrounding the evaluation of the quality levels of citizen science data. But let me jump my screen onto the discussion section down below the Google Doc here. We do have a lot of comments. Appreciate. Okay, so here it is. We want to have some discussion about the objective that we identified from the previous winter's meeting. The objective is to be able to evaluate the maturity of citizen science data. And one way to do that is to come up with a series of quality levels, or you can call that tags, that we can associate with different citizen science data products, and also a rubric or a matrix to evaluate the citizen science data to come up with the quality levels. So the survey that I just we just talked about partly addresses this objective from one aspect, is to identify, hopefully identify the data quality requirements from different types of users. And then based on that requirements, that we can come up with some reasonable quality levels or the rubric that makes sense to target audience of the citizen science data. So I just want to open the door here to see if you have any suggestions or comments or thoughts on this particular objective. And I have some seeding questions listed here, and hopefully we can inspire some comments from you. And you can either type your comment questions, or you can just speak up. I think this is a free discussion session for now. I'll pause there.
So yeah, Shane, you want to stop sharing so I can share my
Sure.
screen?
Go ahead.
Okay, great. So as Yashin has mentioned it, and he has put some seeding questions here. And I will go with the first one for now. And the question is, what challenges do you see with pursuing a rubric for evaluation of quality level of citizen science data? And you can unmute yourself.
Yeah, this is Greg Newman. I'd be happy to start the conversation, and you know, at risk of being controversial, maybe I'll be controversial, but I mean, I think one of the challenges, that question right there, Peng, what challenge do you see in pursuing a rubric? I think one of the challenges is, you know, people struggle with being graded. So, you know, if a volunteer effort was spun up by a community-based monitoring organization, and they put a lot of heart and soul and sweat into the collection of a suite of data regarding the pH of a stream, for example, you know, they might, and maybe they end up putting that data set through this rubric proposed, and they end up on the not so great end of the rubric scale as far as the quality of the resulting work. There could be some ramifications of demotivation and devaluation of the volunteer effort that ensued. So, you know, that's a tough topic to talk about, but it's certainly a challenge I think we would face.
Yes, it's definitely, we see that all the time when we assessing data product using maturity metrics, whether it's a scientific quality or stewardship quality. I think part of the communication there is really now to downplay their effort rather than to convey the current state of the data set to users. So that would help users to make better use decisions. And in a way, it also helps the maturity of the data and help people recognize there are certain things they could do to improve the quality or maturity of their data.
Yes, thank you, Peng. That's exactly right. And I think of the United Way campaign thermometer bulb, and if there's a light towards so we can raise more money, or if there's like a, you know, like a profile completion, like back in the day on LinkedIn, your profile is 60% complete. Maybe you filled out the registration form and that's all you got. You're feeling like you got a 60% on your test, but there's a path forward, right, in the framing of that. And so if we can frame it whereby there's a path forward to move that needle from 60 to 85%, then there's a lot of motivation that could actually be positive.
That's correct.
So even though I'm timekeeping in this session, maybe I'll comment really quickly. And even though I'm not a citizen science data expert, one parallel analogy that comes to mind is with respect to working with remote sensing science data. And the parallel that I see here is that the raw inputs that are that the citizen scientists contribute as their data inputs are, in my view, kind of synonymous to the raw telemetry data that are collected by satellites in remote sensing. And in general, the existing rubrics that are out there for satellite data generally don't target raw telemetry. They generally target the higher processing levels. And so I wonder if maybe the focus of where we take this could be targeted towards the higher order products that are kind of you can think of them as the aggregate of the collection of citizen science data. And that way we're not alienating or discrediting or devaluing an individual contributor. And we're focusing our evaluation perhaps on the more refined data products.
Great.
Love that. Yeah, great. Thanks.
I want to follow up on that. I think that's a really good point, David. And that reminds me the presentation and there's Challenge 2020 mission that Clay just talked about. So Clay, I want to ask this question to you. From what I saw from your presentation, Earth Challenge 2020 contains one effort to combine and harmonize citizen science data from different aspects, different projects into a consolidated or harmonized or fused product. I consider that on the level of this aggregated product that David just mentioned. From your in your opinion, do you think this kind of quality levels surrounding these types of consolidated products and a rubric to evaluate the quality levels will be useful in the community, either from the user's perspective as well as the data producer's perspective?
Yeah,
Certainly,
actually,
I think
okay,
it
go
would
ahead.
make our life easier had it already existed. It would help in terms of, if there's something out there that we could leverage that says, hey, you can believe in data to a certain level, and it would be really, really useful. So for us, we tried to think in terms of how much we had to document so that we were document not only the quality, but the processes. And there's a lot of effort in that. And so if you're looking at data sources that already exist and they don't have that metadata, it's really difficult to replicate that. And so having a rubric that could be applied and having standard CS data sets and providers would really have made our life easier. So yeah, I think it would be a great addition to the community to get more interest in CS data and allow it to be applied in more kind of, I would say, the quote unquote real scientists would believe in the data a little bit more. And the more we can show rigor around the process and the rubric involved. Hopefully that answers your question from a technologist, not a scientist.
Great, I like that. Thanks for sharing your thought.
Yeah, I also think that's a great point. I think the conversation and discussion probably would continue in terms what kind of rubric will be relevant to the citizen science data. So this question catches my eyes, and we have expert here. So I would like to ask this question: what makes citizen science data unique, different from data captured or produced through traditional research and measurement mechanisms?
So this is Clay. I think one of the key things for us that we were looking at is that traditional, so if you look at reference grade monitors, underserved communities just absolutely do not have the money and funds to be able to use research grade air monitors. So if we can give a level set with consumer grade and business grade monitors, we can provide a level of confidence for underserved areas to be able to understand their air quality and really they can believe in the measurements they're seeing from lesser grade monitors or sensors.
So we are about 1 minute left in the scheduled time for this portion of the session.
Okay. So the other questions concern whether we can benefit from existing maturity metrics. I think answer will be yes. It will be good related to the question previous one, the unique and the differences between the two types and what are the applicable or what are not. Given the interest of time, I think I probably would stop here for Yaxin to finish up the session. And again, conversation discussions can go offline captured in this note.
Thank you very much. Thanks everyone for the great discussion. I think we have 5 minutes left. Let me share my screen again. And it's time to come up with 3 takeaways. I think we have many takeaways today. And we need to identify or consolidate takeaways together into 3. Do you have any suggestions? I think one takeaway can be the platform concept that both Greg and Clay talked about that can help with the citizen science workflow, as well as improve the trust and confidence with the citizen science data products. Makes sense, or can you help to rephrase that?
Yeah, Gene, that sounds good. I think that's a great takeaway. I think that the more, and I think Clay's presentation underscored this, the more we can embody aspects of quality documentation and quality attainment across all levels of quality, from stewardship to product to et cetera, into the workflows of the citizen science initiatives, the better, because then it's kind of like integrating good habits into the work of citizen science. And so that might be a takeaway for sure. I like it.
Great, and I guess that this workflow involves both like tools and services as well as the people in the projects, and the people are important part. And the quality aspect of citizen science data is highly related to the people. So great, one bullet. Second, do you have any suggestions? How about the survey itself? I'm really excited about. I think I saw positive feedbacks on the survey, and I see people think the survey is useful to capture the data quality requirements from different types of users, not necessarily just from downstream decision-making users, but also in the middle, how or people's requirement, data quality requirement from people on how to encourage better science out of citizen science, and which will eventually facilitate downstream decision making. I think that's one thing we want to move forward, if that's a conclusion that we can make. And the third one I can think of is the objective of having a series of quality levels and a rubric to do the evaluation is useful. We recognize that, but also we recognize some challenges, and that will need some further and continued discussion. It's one of the topics that we want to pursue in the long term. Is that statement valid?
I think so, Yaxine. I think so. I think, and I speaking somewhat from the Citizen Science Association perspective, just being a working group co-chair now, but having history in the organization, I think that the association would be a key partner towards that rubric takeaway. And I would encourage this group to think about reaching out to the CSA to collaborate on that.
Definitely. I'm really looking forward to it. Okay, so it's the end of our session. I really appreciate all the presenters, all the co-chairs, and all the participants for the great presentation, for the great discussion. We received a lot of comments. Let's keep this inspiration and energy continued. We will follow up with you later, and I will reach out to you and invite you to join our conversation and subscribe to the ECIP IQC mailing list. Thanks again. Any other comments before we close?
Thank you, Yashing, for leading the session.
Thank you, Peng.
Thank you, Yashing.
Yang.